Disclaimer. The following is a fan-made production. Lorekeeper Studios does not claim to own any of the characters, locations, or scenarios found within the Hyrule Warriors game or the Legend of Zelda series. All such rights are reserved by their respective owners. This production is made out of a love for the stories that have already been told, and we encourage you to support the original products. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
The Angel of Destiny, Episode 1, Psychostorm. Chapter 1, Far From Home. The following account is as it appears within the Journal of Tycholera. This account was written 6 months after the disappearance.
I was never really one to believe much in fate. In my experience, any event that occurs in this world can be traced back to the choices of someone. Even if it's something that is completely out of anyone's control, it's still up to each individual person to decide whether or not they're affected by it. Or at least, that's what I believed. Even now, I think I'd still stand by that philosophy, but considering the way my life has gone recently, I'm not sure how much I can pin on the choices other people make. I'm writing this for me. I think that this is the best way for me to figure out what's been happening to me lately and what I need to do about it. So, I'll start from the beginning and describe in as much detail as I possibly can the events that have occurred over the last 6 months of my life. Before any of this ever happened, I was a mostly normal kid. I went to a normal high school, hung out with normal people, and did normal things. Although I always knew I was different from everyone else. I knew I didn't belong. I just wasn't sure how different I really was. At the time, the only thing that was noticeably different about me was my severely antisocial nature. I wasn't into most of the things that quote-unquote normal people liked. I didn't do sports, I didn't listen to a lot of pop music, and I didn't really like socializing. Instead, I was a storyteller. If it had a story to be told, I was into it, be it movies, books, video games. I loved learning about other worlds and seeing how people reacted to completely insane situations. I was perfectly content with my life, but it did often keep me from making a lot of friends, and in the eyes of anyone except for a relatively small group of people, I was a nobody. I kept to myself, did my schoolwork, and generally just avoided angering the people who might possibly want to hurt me. Writing this journal, I realize how funny it is that someone can go from being a complete loser to the most popular kid in the school in just a few months. But I guess that's life. 1 minute it's just you versus the world, and the next you're being asked to lead an army of men who are all at least twice your age. To say that I wanted to get dragged into a war would be so far from the truth, I would say they were on opposite ends of the world. I wasn't a fighter, nor was I interested in the military at all, but for some reason, after everything that's happened, I can't imagine my life going any other way. There was nothing I could have done to prepare for the events of the last few months. The day that I got dragged into the war started off like any other, and despite being so long ago, I can remember everything about that day with surprisingly vivid detail. I guess that's one of the perks of a photographic memory. Like any other day, I woke up early that morning, donned my glasses and my favorite green hoodie, and trudged off to school. Throughout the day, there was nothing out of the ordinary. I went to all my classes like normal, and everything was exactly how it should have been. Even in the natural world, there wasn't any indication that anything was different about that day. The sky was bright and clear, the plant life was natural. If there were any signs of something being amiss, they weren't apparent to the normal human eye. I remember the bell had just rung, and I was on my way to the buses when the bright, cheery sky suddenly became dark. Looking around, I also noticed a faded purple tint in what little light there was left. I turned back to the school courtyard and noticed many of my fellow students pointing up towards the sky. Upon following their direction, I saw a small, glowing orb floating high above the center of the courtyard. The sphere was surrounded by a vortex of dark clouds, almost as if it were a hurricane. But there was no wind or rain. It was actually quite peaceful. I wasn't certain, but it seemed that this orb was the source of the mysterious purple light. Looking closely at it, I thought I had seen something like it somewhere before, but no matter how hard I thought about it, I couldn't quite place it. Hesitantly, I and many other students began approaching the orb in the sky in order to get a better look at it. As I slowly stepped closer and closer, a feeling of dread began to form in my chest, and it only got stronger with every step. It seemed that all the other students had noticed the orb by this point, and I could hear each individual discussing their various theories as to what the orb was. Many suggested that it was a secret government project that was being tested. Others offered the ideas of aliens, and some still suggested more obscure ideas that I do not feel the need to mention. I stopped a distance away from the orb, squinting and trying my hardest to identify what it was I was seeing. I was certain now that I had seen it somewhere before, but I couldn't come up with anything. The whole courtyard quickly became filled with the chatter of people trying to identify the object. Students, teachers, and staff members all stood together, discussing the strange new object that had appeared within the sky. As we stood there, I, along with several other people, noticed that the light was getting brighter, almost as if it were charging energy for something. Suddenly, an enormous pillar of light shot down to the earth from the orb, striking the center of the school courtyard. Once it touched ground, the pillar began to generate a large ring of energy that quickly started to spread out from its origin. As the ring passed over the terrain, it caused it to disappear, replacing it with a barren, rocky ground. Even the people that were standing there when the light passed over them seemed to completely disappear from existence. My fellow students and I immediately panicked and started running in the opposite direction, but it didn't take long to realize that the ring was expanding far faster than any of us could run. I turned back periodically to see just how much time I had left before the light would catch up to me. Once, while doing this, I tripped on the curb, causing me to fall to the ground. With lost hope, I shut my eyes as tight as I could, not wanting to witness my last moments on Earth. I laid on the ground helplessly, awaiting my inevitable demise. But the moment I expected the light to pass over me, I instead felt a strange sensation, almost as if there was a strong gust of wind. As soon as that feeling was gone, I felt something I wasn't expecting. I felt rain. I opened my eyes, only to realize that not only was I still alive, but that I hadn't left my place on the road. I stood up and looked around, trying to figure out exactly what had happened. If we hadn't gone anywhere, then why did it appear as if everything beyond the ring of light had disappeared? All of my fellow students seemed to be just as confused as I was, everyone checking to make sure that they weren't dead. Despite seemingly making it through the situation alive, I still had a strange sense that something wasn't right. I decided to investigate further and see if I couldn't figure anything out on my own. I knew that I recognized the orb in the sky from somewhere, and I was certain that remembering what it was would help me figure out what had happened. So, hoping to find something that might help me remember, and in turn figure out where we were, I ventured outward toward the edge of the ring that I had seen before. I darted through the now drenched courtyard that had been bright and sunny just moments before. The rain seemed to fall harder and harder with every step as I rushed toward the outer reaches of the school, dodging teachers and staff who had now started gathering up students in the center of the courtyard. They worried me a little bit at first, but I quickly realized that through the chaos of the recent events, they were having a hard time getting anyone to stay calm, and they weren't really able to pay attention to someone like me. Much to my surprise, it wasn't long before I caught up to the ring that had previously been moving twice, if not 3 times as fast as me. Shortly outside the school bounds, it had completely stopped moving, and I was able to clearly see the separation between the landscape I was all too used to seeing and the rocky terrain I had previously observed. Standing right next to it, I was able to get a much better look at the ring itself. It had a beautiful and intricate pattern, as various glowing lines weaved in and out of each other. While I stood there, the same feeling of familiarity that had haunted me since the light had appeared in the sky returned, and I thought as hard as I could, trying to figure out what it was that I was forgetting. but all I ended up finding was how to get a headache. Realizing that I was getting nowhere trying to remember something about it, I decided to experiment and try to learn something about it instead. With nothing to gain by simply staring at it, I hesitantly stepped over the ring from the world I had known to this new and foreign land. The moment I placed my foot onto the dusty terrain, the ground under my feet cracked, and I felt as though an intense weight had fallen upon me, dragging me harder toward the ground. The sudden increase in gravity caught me off guard, causing me to stagger and fall to the ground, further increasing the size of a small crater I had made. I sat on the ground for a moment, trying to make sense of the sudden shift I had felt, wondering to myself why on earth such a difference would occur. But while I sat there, an unfamiliar voice called out from behind the rocks in the distance.
Ah! General Taikara!
I jumped at the call of this strange and unexpected voice. Turning my head toward the sound, I noticed a large group of men turning a corner around the large boulders in the distance. They were all dressed in heavy metal armor, making them look like medieval knights. They all carried large swords and shields, and the vast majority of them wore helmets that blocked their faces. As I observed the unexpectedly large group of men, one of them approached me. The man was far taller than many of the others, and his armor was of a much finer quality, being glazed with a fine gold trim and possessing intricate patterns along every piece of the set. He was clearly the leader of the group.
It is a pleasure to finally meet you, General.
I gave the man a confused look, and he even looked behind me in a really cliché way to make sure that he wasn't addressing someone else. Not seeing anyone else he could be talking to, I returned my gaze to the man. I tried to stand up in order to address him more properly, but I found the sudden shift in gravity too difficult to overcome at the moment's notice. Falling back to the ground, I decided to just talk to him from my current position. I'm sorry, but who are you talking to? Not seeming to notice my struggle to stand up, the man cocked his head, as if he were the one who didn't know what was going on.
Are you not the one who calls himself Taikara?
Yes? I hesitated. It was true that I sometimes assumed the title Taikara when I was in situations where I felt my real name wouldn't be appropriate. However, hardly anyone actually knew me by that name. I really only used it in online settings, and those people never saw my face. There was no possible way this man could recognize me as Taikara. How did you know that name?
How do I know that name? How do I know that name?
Yes, that is what I asked. How do you know that name? It's mostly secret. No one who knows that name knows my face. The man burst out in a frantic laughter. His booming voice had clearly attracted the attention of my fellow students back at the courtyard. I turned back only to see that a large crowd had gathered at the edge of the ring, with a handful of the students snickering and pointing in my direction. Feelings of humiliation rushed through my mind as the man seemed to mock me. I opened my mouth to ask him to be quiet, but he spoke first.
Oh, sir. The legend said you would have quite the sense of humor, but I never expected anything like this. Everyone knows the legends of Taikara, the angel who soars across the universe protecting the weak and helping those in need. You truly are exactly as the legends say you are.
And what exactly do these legends say?
What is there to say? You match them exactly. Your confident and demanding demeanor, your incredible humor, dare I say more? Even your clothes match the description of your previous ventures into this land.
Wiping tears of laughter from his eyes, the man looked up and down my figure as if to examine my full appearance.
Although, I don't seem to remember anything about glasses. You told the princess that you only wore glasses on your first trip to...
He didn't even finish his statement before his expression changed from joy to horror. He quickly dropped down to one knee in a respectful bow, I jumped slightly. I wasn't expecting such a sudden gesture, especially following the spectacle that had preceded it.
Oh my, I'm so sorry, young man. I didn't realize this was your first visit to Hyrule. If I had known, I wouldn't have mistakenly mocked you so openly. I hope you will accept the apology of this foolish captain.
I was unsure as to how to respond to him. I had just met this man, and in the span of a few minutes he had gone through at least 3 different mood shifts. Not to mention he had completely humiliated me in front of hundreds of my peers. And a part of myself told me not to forgive him for it. But my good side got the better of me in the end. I will accept your apology, if you will explain to me where we are, who you are, and who you think I am. The man stood up and nodded his head, and even extended his hand, offering to help me stand up as well.
Of course, sir. You may call me Captain Bargen, and welcome to Hyrule.